"Don't grab me. Don't grab me." Those words echoed across Atlanta that night, a city already simmering under the weight of its own drama, yet unaware that it was about to ignite in a way that would leave fans, insiders, and cast members alike scrambling for answers. What happened wasn't just a rumor. It wasn't another fleeting story to scroll past. It began as a whisper, a faint, almost casual transmission that somehow slipped past the usual channels, and in the hands of the internet, it exploded. A headline was born, and from that headline, a wildfire spread faster than anyone could have imagined. A shadowed audio recording appeared, raw and unpolished, the kind of clip that doesn't need clarity to make an impact. There was a voice, a cadence familiar to some, a presence unmistakable to others, and then 4 words that detonated the Bravo universe like a bomb going off in the middle of a quiet street. "I'm late and it's Todd's." Nothing else was needed. Within moments, timelines collapsed, direct messages erupted, fan pages flickered in and out of silence before re-emerging louder than ever. And then, as if the chaos hadn't been enough, whispers of a so-called DNA report began circulating, unverified, unsourced, yet powerful enough to threaten reputations in ways no one was prepared for. In the center of it all stood Kandi Burruss, watching her carefully built life, her marriage, her family, her brand, become collateral damage in a storm she never asked for. This wasn't another reality TV rumor. This was something darker, something that could not simply be edited away. Before the recording, before the unverified report, before the universe went into overdrive speculating and theorizing, there were messages. Texts, screenshots, direct evidence that spoke volumes without needing to scream. They weren't fear-driven, they weren't wild confessions. They whispered intent, comfort, and in some cases, a calculated tone that would later be re-examined in ways that made them chilling. Days after the initial chaos, a screenshot circulated. It was simple, mundane even, but when viewed in the context of what was about to unfold, it became incendiary. "Finally got my phone back on. It's been broke for 3 days. By the way, I've been laughing every day since Queens. We was turned up for real. Just want you to know I'm not going to rape you on camera, so no worry." That message wasn't panic. It was reassurance. And reassurance in the context of what followed only complicated the story further. Atlanta, already known for its drama, didn't just feel hot that night. The city felt volatile, electric, like it was holding its breath. When that shadowed clip hit the public, it didn't matter that the audio was raw or unstable. All that mattered were those 4 words, "I'm late and it's Todd's." No context, no explanation, just a phrase that detonated the rumor mill and divided fans into camps that would spend weeks arguing, analyzing, and theorizing. Private messages became public fodder. Fan accounts turned into makeshift detective agencies, piecing together details from every camera angle, every confessional, every subtle glance. Blogs lit up like flares in the night, their headlines urgent, speculative, and increasingly vicious. And while the internet debated and dissected, Kandi Burruss watched her marriage become a public crime scene, a scenario she had never signed up for, a story she did not write, but was forced to live. Because this wasn't just gossip or shade anymore. This threatened reputations, it threatened family, it threatened the foundation of everything she had worked to build. Then came the escalation. Words like drugging entered the room, allegations that had the power to ruin lives instantly. What had been a heated night now became a courtroom without walls, a space where casual conversation transformed into life-altering declarations. This chick tried to turn it around and said that we tried to drug her. The statement alone was enough to make the room fall into a heavy silence, the kind of quiet that comes when everyone knows the damage is real. "You can go to jail for that," another voice cut in, sharp and unflinching. And for Kandi, the room wasn't about drama. It was about life, about children, about a future that could be dismantled in minutes. Fear in that room wasn't for a storyline, it was for survival. And the internet, as always, watched in real time, drawing conclusions from voices, postures, and expressions, while the people actually living it endured a moment that no editing could soften. The moment everything snapped wasn't online. It wasn't a leaked file or a screenshot. It was in front of cameras, in a room full of people who could not pretend anymore. Kandi stood. She didn't yell, she didn't scream. She walked toward betrayal itself, not for the cameras, not for the audience, but for the undeniable truth she was facing. Security rushed in, voices overlapped, accusations flew like shards of glass, and in that moment, the room realized this was bigger than a television show, bigger than a viral clip. This was a fracture in real life, in a marriage, in a family. Once the cameras stopped rolling, the chaos didn't. Atlanta scrolled, refreshed, judged. Screenshots multiplied, voice notes leaked, anonymous accounts appeared claiming omniscience, each one fueling the speculation further. One word became a weapon: pregnancy. Not confirmed, not denied, but enough to ignite another wave of panic. And then came the silence. No statements from Kandi, no denials from Porsha, no clarifications from Todd. And in this industry, silence is rarely accidental. Silence is the inhale before the strike, a pause that signals calculation rather than chaos. Fans didn't wait for confirmation. They made conclusions. They built stories. They split into camps. One side believed the leaks were designed to destabilize Kandi. The other believed the truth had simply moved faster than it could be controlled. And while the show remained silent, the internet roared, filling every gap with conjecture, accusation, and assumption. Then came the next wave. A second audio file surfaced. Not dramatic, not emotional, but cold and measured. A clipped voice, allegedly Porsha's cadence, with another presence barely audible, possibly Todd's, possibly not. The audio didn't confirm anything, it didn't deny anything, but it changed the tone entirely. It wasn't chaos, it was strategy. It suggested control, manipulation, and a calculated approach to the narrative. And when audiences realized this wasn't about passion anymore, it became clear this was about power. As if the situation weren't already complex enough, lawyers reportedly entered the scene. Meetings behind closed doors, private discussions, precautions that are rarely taken unless something real is at stake. When legal teams step in this fast, it means that reputations, exposure, and potentially criminal liability are being considered, not just entertainment value, but real consequences. Then one sentence appeared that shook fans. This season is being recut. Edits aren't random. They erase villains, they highlight heroes, they rewrite narratives. And if something is being recut, it is because someone wants control. Control over perception, over legacy, over the version of history that will be presented. Nothing here is accidental. Everything is strategic. Even as these behind-the-scenes moves unfolded, the public was left in a limbo of speculation. Screenshots from months ago, voice messages from weeks past, seemingly innocuous moments were revisited, analyzed, and reinterpreted. Every look, every pause, every hug was dissected in slow motion. Fans weren't just watching reality TV anymore. They were constructing a timeline, a story, a pattern. The narrative began to split. One side believed the leaks were designed to destabilize Kandi. The other believed the truth had simply moved faster than it could be controlled. And while the show remained silent, the internet roared, filling every gap with conjecture, accusation, and assumption.
But here's where the story twists, where things get deeper than the public could imagine. Before the tape, before the alleged DNA report, before the internet crowned a villain and prepared its armies, there were messages. Not blogs, not a source says, real messages. Texts that didn't scream panic or fear, they whispered intent. Days later, one such screenshot surfaced, and the world got a glimpse of a calculated calm that was anything but ordinary. Finally got my phone back on. It's been broke for 3 days. By the way, I've been laughing every day since Queens. We was turned up for real. Just want you to know I'm not going to rape you on camera, so no worry. At first glance, it might seem casual, even humorous, but in context, it was a demonstration of control, of awareness, of a person managing a narrative before the narrative even existed. Atlanta didn't just feel hot that night, it felt volatile, like the city itself was holding its breath. Because when that shadowed audio clip surfaced online, everything changed in minutes. It wasn't clear, it wasn't polished, it wasn't even fully audible, but it didn't need to be. It only needed 4 words to ignite the chaos, to shatter the equilibrium, to set the Bravo rumor mill on fire. I'm late, and it's Todd's. No context, no confirmation, just chaos. And within hours, private messages had become public guesses, fan accounts had transformed into amateur detectives, and blogs flared like emergency beacons in the night. And at the epicenter of this digital storm, Kandi's marriage, her life, her reputation, everything she had spent years building was being pulled apart in ways she never imagined. Just when social media believed it had reached peak chaos, a second wave emerged, more insidious than the first. An alleged DNA document began circulating quietly in inboxes, in private groups, in chat threads behind closed doors. Unverified, unsourced, potentially meaningless, but powerful enough to break trust in real time. Atlanta didn't sleep that night. People scrolled, they refreshed, they judged. While the internet debated, one truth became undeniable: the past was no longer buried. Long before a tape, long before an alleged report, there had been tension, confrontations, and moments captured on camera that, at the time, might have seemed insignificant or awkward, but now looked catastrophic. According to insiders close to production, the real explosion had been quietly building for months behind the scenes, at group dinners, at cocktail parties, behind those hot smiles that now looked sharper, deliberate, even dangerous. At the center of it all were 2 women who had once shared a circle, who had once laughed together, who had once seemed inseparable, Kandi and Porsha. And when everything finally snapped, it didn't happen online. It didn't happen in a tweet or a comment. It happened in a room full of cameras, with words being thrown that no one could take back, that no editor could soften, that no soundtrack could mute. Claims of attempted drugging, threats, lies, all converging in a room where people realized that this was no longer entertainment, it was life unfolding in real time, and the stakes were catastrophic. Kandi didn't scream, she didn't yell. She stood up, not for the cameras, not for a storyline, but for herself. She moved toward the source of betrayal. Names flew through the air, security rushed, voices overlapped, and suddenly the cast realized this wasn't something you could wrap up by the end of an episode. This was a rupture, a fracture that would rewrite the season, that would redefine how audiences would look at every interaction, every smile, every hug filmed over the last few years. When Todd finally entered the room, the response wasn't dramatic, it was frozen. His presence, his words, "If that baby is mine, everything is over," landed like a truth grenade with no place to fall safely. No music, no confessional, just reality. Kandi sank to the floor, not in drama, not in performance, but in grief. The grief of betrayal, of lives unraveling in front of her eyes, in front of millions. By that moment, it was clear. This story wouldn't end with who was right or wrong. It would end with who survives. By sunrise, Atlanta wasn't asking what happened anymore. It was asking what was true and what was staged. Screenshots multiplied overnight. Voice notes leaked into DMs. Anonymous accounts appeared with profiles like, "I know everything and they've been lying to you." One word in particular became the weapon that split audiences: pregnancy. Not as a fact, not as evidence, but as a weapon. Fans divided instantly. One camp believed everything, the other believed nothing, and both were willing to go to war.
Producers were silent, the network invisible, cast members locked into private meetings with lawyers. Kandi sources said she didn't sleep, not from stress, but from shock, from the realization that while the internet saw a rumor, she saw her life disassembled piece by piece. Reality TV tension had transformed into a courtroom without walls. Every text was examined, every hug replayed, every smile analyzed frame by frame. Even moments from years ago, once insignificant, were now reinterpreted as evidence of a much larger pattern.
By the second day, the story was no longer about a single night. It had become about a pattern, a history of interactions, decisions, and tensions stretching back months, years even. Fans dug deep. They scrolled through Instagram posts, old interviews, reunion footage, anything involving Todd, anything involving Porsha, anything ever said in anger. Side-by-side compilations appeared on fan timelines. Coincidences were now treated as proof. People weren't merely watching, they were constructing a narrative where randomness didn't exist. And then came silence. 48 hours of it. Kandi did not speak. Porsha did not speak. Todd did not speak. The network did not speak. In this business, silence is rarely accidental, and when journalists tried to reach sources close to the cast, the answer was always the same: no comment. Then, a new twist. A private message allegedly from someone close to production began circulating. No name, no face, just a claim. There's more that hasn't aired yet, and it's worse. Reddit went feral, Twitter collapsed, TikTok turned into a courtroom. Suddenly, the question was no longer whether there was another tape, it was, what is on it? Every fan wanted to see, every fan wanted to know, and the narratives collided. One painting Kandi as a woman fighting lies with all she had, the other painting her as someone discovering a truth that could never be undone. Todd became the ghost in the story, not on camera, not online, but everywhere in the narrative. Every theory, every timeline, every fan discussion looped back to him. Fans demanded to know, why hadn't he confirmed or denied anything? Why was he absent? According to insiders, his absence wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate. Panic is loud, planning is silent. Then came a draft email, allegedly never sent, recovered from a device that may or may not have passed through production hands. It read like a warning, and one sentence alone fractured the internet. If this is ever made public, no one walks away clean. Not written in anger, not written in fear, but written in calculation. And that changed the temperature entirely. The alleged scandal wasn't about passion anymore, it was about control. And then a 3-second security cam video surfaced. Grainy, low light, a door slightly ajar, someone walking past, not clear enough to identify, but clear enough to suggest secrecy. The internet dubbed it the door video. It didn't prove anything, but it implied everything. And in scandal culture, implication is often more dangerous than evidence. It forces the audience to fill in the blanks themselves, and the audience did not hold back. By dawn, fan accounts had divided into armies. One side believed the scandal was planted to destabilize Kandi. The other believed the truth leaked faster than it could be buried. No one trusted the network. No one trusted the blogs. No one trusted anyone, because trust evaporates when the story outpaces the truth. Insiders whispered about legal meetings, private interventions, and recuts. The phrase, "this season is getting recut," appeared. Edits change narratives, they erase villains, they create heroes, they rewrite history frame by frame. If something is being protected, something else is being buried, and fans asked the only questions left. Is the new cut meant to expose or erase? Are we going to see more or less? And then it hit everyone at once. What if the first leak wasn't a reveal, but a destruction? Misdirection is not fiction, it's strategic. Multiple leaks are never accidental, they are controlled damage. The audience waits now, not for proof, but for permission. Permission for someone to speak, for someone to crack. When that happens, every whispered secret becomes claimed, every denied accusation becomes questioned, every deleted frame resurfaces center screen.
Finally, a private message appeared. 7 words, no brand, no verification. It's not the tape you think. That phrase terrified everyone, because if the leak wasn't what it seemed, someone was guiding the fire and deciding exactly where it would burn. The clock was ticking, not metaphorically, not emotionally, but legally, contractually, publicly. The next move would not be emotional, it would be calculated. Because by this point, everyone understood the truth. This story was no longer about pregnancy, it was about power. Who controls the narrative, who ends the season, who leaves clean, and who gets dragged into a history they didn't write but must live with. By the 4th night, the silence no longer felt accidental, it felt deliberate, engineered. Another private file surfaced, no name, no logo, no context, just a simple note. It's not the tape you think. That phrase alone terrifies because it suggests control, calculation, and the presence of a guiding hand behind the chaos. Everything that had leaked, every rumor, every screenshot, every whispered accusation was no longer just happenstance, it was part of a larger, controlled pattern. Fans waited, watched, and speculated. Permission, not proof, became the currency. Someone, somewhere would have to break, and when they did, every whispered secret would become claimed, every denied accusation would be questioned, and every edited moment would resurface as undeniable evidence. And that is the reality of this story. Not about the tape, not about messages or rumors. This is a story about power, control, and narrative. It is about who survives when the truth and lies collide, when reputations, families, and futures hang in the balance, and when silence becomes the loudest weapon of all. Atlanta was left to ask questions that may never have answers. The fans, the cast, and the city itself had witnessed a fracture that went deeper than any storyline. And as notifications continued to light up screens quietly, somewhere in the night, a single phrase appeared: black screen. Because when power meets privacy, something always breaks. And in this case, nothing feels finished. Not the tape, not the messages, not the vanishing timelines, not the locked doors, and not the people who stopped talking. Every new piece of information only raises darker questions. Was it chaos, or was it coordination? Exposure, or strategy? Leak, or warning? The answers may never come, but one thing is certain. This story isn't just entertainment. It's a fracture, a collision of reality and performance, truth and manipulation, and it's far from over. If you've made it this far, you already understand the stakes. This wasn't just a messy rumor, it was a fracture, a moment where silence became louder than screaming and unanswered questions turned into their own kind of evidence. Subscribe, stay alert, watch closely, and never trust the quiet. Because in this case, silence isn't peace. Silence is preparation, calculation, and control. And when the next piece drops, it will not just reveal the story, it will rewrite it entirely.